Hey everybody! In today's tutorial I want to show you something that literally came to me in a dream. I had just ordered this new for the second half of Celebration stamp set called Pedal Pusher, and I was falling asleep one night thinking about what I could do with the images in this set, and I came up with the idea of having a puddle of water reflect the bike. And I even figured out how to do it before I fell completely asleep. And I remembered the next day. So, yay me. Anyway, it's a very easy technique, and I hope you enjoy it. Here's what this stamp set looks like. It has some adorable images that can be put into the little basket on the bike. It's a bicycle built for two. This stamp set is available for free with a $50 purchase. And here is the card that I made with it, with the little puddle of water reflecting the bike. I just love it. So to begin with, I have a piece of Post-it tape that I cut with this die. Do you recognize this die? It is from the Festive Fireplace Bundle from the Holiday Catalog, and it was the perfect abstract shape for a puddle of water. And then I have some 2-inch wide Post-it labeling tape or masking tape, and I just cut the shape out of that, and that's going to be my puddle, sort of a mask just for sponging. I'm using Tempting Turquoise ink, and I'm just going to sponge that area to make it look like water. Just remember that this die has some pretty intricate little cuts on the bottom and the top of the shape. You can see these little points, top and bottom. And you want to make sure that you don't accidentally lift those while you're sponging. So kind of work from those into the puddle area. And just be careful not to lift them. You don't have to worry about getting the ink smooth in the puddle. I think that sort of an organic look is better. And after I sponge it, I'm going to go ahead and put the cut piece of the masking tape back into the opening. And just remove the tape around that. That's going to let me create the ground around the puddle. So I'll just hold that down and remove this tape, but you do want to save it. I am going to use that again. Then I'm just going to cut myself another piece of this tape, which I love, by the way. This stuff is the bomb, especially the 2-inch, which is a little harder to find. Sorry about the cat noises. I just got home and somebody wants me to pay attention to them instead of doing my video. So I'm going to create a horizon line with the other piece of tape, and I'm going to use crumb cake ink to create the ground around the puddle. Now I like to dab it off on my mat a little bit. I think you've seen me do this before I sponge, just to give me a little bit less of that sponge texture. But again, this is the ground, and I do not want this to be smooth. If I wanted it to be smooth, I would probably use an ink blending tool, and I would be a little bit more careful about the ink application. I do not want this to be all even. It looks better if it's a little bit variegated. It makes it look just a touch more realistic. So this comes together pretty fast. You want to make sure you get all the way up against the tape, and you'll see I'm also sponging from the masked piece out. That's helping me keep those little teeny pieces in place around the pool. And if your mask is a little bit off and you have a little white edge, you can always go over it with the crumb cake ink just to fill in those edges. It's okay if you get a little crumb cake ink into the pool. Now I'm going to replace the negative mask again. And actually, the first time that I made this card, I didn't do this. I stamped before I didn't have to put this mask down again. I stamped after I sponged, but I also had time to wait for it to dry, and I didn't want to do that on video. So here I'm just replacing the mask again. But you can most definitely skip this step if you want to, and do the next step after you have sponged the pool the very first time. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm just going to wrap the tape around the back of the card, as I do need it to stay in place for this next step. And I have a mirror image piece of rubber from So Suzy Stamps. I love this. It's just a great big smooth piece of rubber that you can use for this reflection technique. And I've set up the bike where it needs to be. That's how I positioned the tape in the first place, is I figured out where I wanted my bike to be, upside down. And then I can just put the cardstock into the corner of the mini MISTI just to make sure, just check and make sure that I do have it in the right place before I use the mirror image stamp. So I'm going to remove the cardstock. And this is Archival Basic Gray ink that I'm using. And I'm going to go ahead and ink it up twice because I do want it to stay pretty wet in order to transfer my now reversed image, reversed courtesy of the mirror image stamp, onto my cardstock. So I put the cardstock in the corner of the mini MISTI and I just rub it to transfer that image. The ink is still wet on the mirror image stamp and it's reversing my image for me so it'll be a perfect reflection, which is very important if you have a non-symmetrical stamp image like I do with this bike. And now it's been transferred into that opening. The extra post-it note was just to make sure the handles didn't transfer too. So now I'm going to remove the tape, but I'm noticing that I got pink ink from the sponge all over the back of my cardstock, and I do not want it on the front. This happens to me daily. You can see I have ink all over my hands. So I'm going to clean them off with my absorber before I move on to the next step. Then I'll just peel this tape off. Remove the cardstock, and you can see, oh my gosh, I loved it so much the first time that I did it and it worked. It's so fun. So now I can stamp the image the correct side up, above the reflection. So I'll use the MISTI again. And at first I thought, oh, I'll just move the cardstock underneath the stamp, but it's actually just much easier just to position the stamp where I want it on the MISTI. And that way, if it doesn't ink perfectly the first time, I can stamp it again. So I'll just put the cardstock in the corner of the MISTI, make sure I got all the ink off. That's another classic Lydia mistake, is not getting the stamp completely clean before this step. Put it in the corner, and then I'll just line the wheels of the bike up so that they're touching, and you can see now how perfect that reflection is using that mirror image stamp. And with the MISTI, with mirror image stamping, what's so different about this process is that I could have inked that image multiple times and transferred it until it was perfect. Whereas without the MISTI, you just have to give it your best the first time and hope that the ink is saturated enough. But this makes it truly perfect. So there's the little pool, and here again is what it looks like on a finished card. I'm so pleased with this. I hope you enjoyed this technique. Thanks so much for watching.